Hello and welcome to the part 2 of the July Uranium Report for 2022, where we'll talk about some of the most important recent fundamental developments in the uranium industry. The world is fixated, as you know, on ESG, GHG, greenhouse gas emissions and the like. Well, according to the UN, nuclear power is on par with all your other green energy sources in terms of lifetime CO2 emissions. Hence, it's only natural that EU Parliament recently categorized nuclear power as sustainable energy source, along with natural gas. Next stage is for the EU countries to vote, and the results of this vote are very likely to be favorable to the nuclear industry. There are only 2 countries that seem to be opposed. After that, the reactors will be eligible for 350 billion euros per year in green energy financing. Moreover, in the longer term, ESG funds, pension funds and the like will bring lots of capital inflow into the uranium sector. Talking about the long term, since March, Cameco hasn't got any new long-term contracts. One reason is that Cameco insists on a higher market price index in those longer-term contracts, meaning that such a market leader as Cameco actually expects uranium prices to still be much higher in the future. In mid-May, Cameco commented that we're still early in the contracting cycle, especially given the recent shift from underfeeding to overfeeding. Currently, there is very little underfeeding left. For more on over and underfeeding, the basics of conversion and enrichment, see my May Uranium Report. Inventories of uranium held by US reactors, US power generators are over 108 million pounds right now, which can last for around 2.5 years. But looking into more distant future, on the chart for example, we see the blue area expanding into the future. This blue area is the deficit of uranium given current long-term contracts. Or this deficit is the difference between expected uranium requirements by those power generators and the existing purchase contracts. As you see, the deficit expands enormously over the next, say, decade, so that's extremely bullish in the longer term. Moving on to news from different countries around the world. With the largest number of nuclear power generators, the US is going to purchase $4.3 billion worth of uranium from local producers. As the price of conversion and enrichment services has recently increased, it indicates approaching service capacity limits. This leads to overfeeding, which temporarily resolves that capacity limit at the cost of greater consumption of uranium. And this higher consumption, this overfeeding, in turn will lead to higher uranium prices in the future. Moving on to UK, it's also pushing further into nuclear. They plan to triple their current nuclear generation by 2050. And alongside those targets, the UK are talking with South Korea on building new generators. South Korea is actually aiming at becoming a global supplier of nuclear technology, and they are looking for new tech cooperations with major players in the US. In Finland, in the meantime, Green Party, again that's Green Party, embraces nuclear as sustainable energy. And moving on to Middle East, in the Middle East there's currently only one nuclear reactor in the UAE. But in addition to that existing reactor, the third out of the 4 reactors being built is now near completion, with 1.4 gigawatt in each of those 4 reactors. Moving on to Japan, a decade after the Fukushima disaster, Japan is gradually returning to nuclear power. By 2030, Japan plans to have 20 to 22% of energy to come from nuclear sources. So far, Japan has already restarted 10 nuclear reactors, plus 16 reactors are to be approved for restart sometime soon. Recently, the Prime Minister said that nuclear can reduce Japan's dependence on Russian gas. And the Prime Minister also promised to maximize the use of idle reactor fleet. Looking at the details of those idle reactors, as you see, idle reactors, the orange over here, can provide Japan with around half as much power as coal. More interestingly for uranium investors, reactor restarts will stop Japan's selling of uranium inventory. So that's a double-sided bullish effect, increasing the demand with reactors being restarted and reducing the supply of uranium with the stoppage of inventory sales. So as you see, global developments in lots of countries are very bullish for uranium sector as of recently. Moving on to looking at a range of uranium investment funds, Sprott bought only £100,000 in May, which was a relatively low amount, and the purchases accelerated again in June when Sprott bought around £1.2 million. And since their inception in July 2021, SPUT, Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, bought £38.5 million. That is around £3.2 million per month on average, so that's pretty cool. Currently, SPUT holds $56.8 million of uranium and $65.4 million, which, whenever they decide to buy uranium, if current prices are applied, will be enough to buy another around £1.6 million. Moving on to Yellow Cake, a UK-based fund bought £2 million in May and nearly £1 million in June. Talking about UK is establishing a future nuclear enabling fund with £120 million in grants for businesses to develop new energy projects. So clearly over the years this might increase the importance of nuclear power in the UK. So there's yet another bullish factor here. Continuing to talk about funds, there's a new ETF that's opening up at the Australian stock market with a very familiar ticker here, again URNM, although it's a different fund. And similar to Sprott's URNM, the Australian ETF will invest into major and junior producers as well as physical uranium. And lastly, talking about funds, a new physical uranium fund, ANU, is opening in Kazakhstan. At the first stage of funding, which is already complete, ANU raised $74 million. That's pretty good versus the expected $50 million. But more importantly, it has the support of the Central Bank of Kazakhstan and Kazatomprom, as you know, one of the largest global uranium producers. And even more interestingly, at the second funding stage, ANU expects to raise around $500 million. Finally, ANU has already got its first purchase of uranium, actually already stored at Cameco's facilities in Canada. So developments in uranium sector are moving along in Kazakhstan and all over the world. As you see, longer term fundamentals are truly promising. We just need some patience to stay the course. So have a nice day, have a nice Sunday. Bye bye.